So you want to take tools on the trail just to be prepared in case of an emergency. But you're in a TJ, and TJs are notoriously small on the inside, so you can't bring a great big old tool chest. Well, where do you start? And I got some thoughts on that. The key here is to prioritize. There are certain things, certain failures on the trail that are more common than others. And one of your big ones is going to be your drive shaft. That you can remove a drive shaft on the trail, and you can put it in four-wheel drive if it's the rear shaft, and you can drive it out on the front axle. So why not just go through your factory service manual and look and see what bolt sizes are what? Well, if you're like us and you've got all kinds of modifications and aftermarket equipment, those bolt sizes may not all be the same. The reason why it's important to size these and actually lay hands on them and put wrenches on them, back when we blew up the Dana 30 and the Dana 35 and put the Dana 44s in, we had to send both of our drive shafts into Tom Woods. Well, when they came back, lo and behold, the hardware was different sizes. And I know this because we had to take the drive shaft out, which was the Tom Woods drive shaft, when the Dana 35 shelled. So I know what wrenches I used to take it apart. And when we got it back, all the new hardware was different. It was beefier hardware and bigger sizes. So always verify exactly what size you've got. So in order to build a proper toolkit, you really do need to go underneath the vehicle. And you need to actually lay eyes on and put wrenches on your U-joints, both the front and the rear. And you also want to verify the sizes of your hardware on your front drive shaft, at the front U-joint, also at the rear of the front drive shaft. Another helpful hint when you're out on the trail and to help minimize your toolkit is to make sure ahead of time that all of your hose clamps are the same. That you don't have some of those old Chrysler spring types that you have to squeeze with a pair of vice grips or a pair of channel locks to get them to release. You want to have them all the same. As you can see, during the build process when we were building the Mistress, we went through and we made sure that every one of the hose clamps was the same style, same size head, so that you can work on any hose clamp in this with a 5/16 wrench. Another thing you're going to want to carry on the trail is hardware to pull your front axle shafts in case you have to. Once you get the tire off, all you're going to need to do this is a 36mm socket, 1/2-inch drive ratchet, 13mm 12-point socket. The 12-point is very important. The bolts that hold your hubs in are 12-point bolts. And you're also going to need a 12mm box end ratchet wrench is the best, because you're going to have to pull your brake caliper. Now some of your brake calipers might be held in with a 7mm Allen. This one, being as how these axles are 95 Rubicon, is a 12mm standard hex. It's always a good idea too, if you're going to be on a trail and you're going to be a long way from home, that you might want to carry a spare serpentine belt and carry the proper tools to release the tensioner so that you can swap a belt if you absolutely have to out on the trail. So now that you've rolled around on the ground with your bulky tool set and taken and written down what you need for a tool bag for your TJ, now you can start putting it together. And one thing that I didn't mention that I should mention is what we run for a lug wrench, just because it's so compact and it's so easy to store, is we run a 30-inch breakover bar with a 6-inch extension and the proper socket to fit our lug nuts and the lug nuts that are on the front spacer plates. You have a real nice spot that it fits just perfect, laying just in the crease by the passenger's feet, just inside the passenger side door. Sits in there real nice, doesn't rattle, doesn't roll around. Good spot for it. You're also going to want to make sure that you've got a jack that's suitable to lift it on the trail. Doesn't always have to be a high lift. You don't necessarily need to have something that looks like a machine gun strapped on your hood, although it can be entertaining. No, a good bottle jack that's of sufficient height to get underneath the axle in case of a tire failure or in case you need to lift the axle for whatever reason, you know, a broken axle shaft or something like that. That is sufficient, and they're also easy to store. We also have one of those stored beside the seat. Just in case the unthinkable happens and you wind up upside down on the trail, you better have the stuff to pull your spark plugs, because in the case of a rollover, oil gets into the cylinders by way of the crankcase ventilation system. I hope you never find yourself in this situation, but in case you do roll over on the trail, you need to have the tools to remove your spark plugs. That's generally going to include a 5/8 inch spark plug socket, a 3/8 inch extension, roughly about 6 inches, and a 3/8 inch ratchet. And no toolkit is complete without pliers, needle nose and standard, some channel locks, some vice grips, both standard and needle nose. Also, you're going to want to bring an assortment of screwdrivers, number 1 through number 3, Phillips and flathead, and a small assortment of nut drivers, but keep it confined to the stuff you know you're going to need. Like as we discussed in the video, get your hose clamps to where they'll all use a 5/16. Reduce it to just what you need. And remember that sockets, especially deep well sockets, are bulky and take up a lot of room in a toolkit. So that's why I suggest using roll packs. Roll packs with combination end wrench and box end wrench, metric and standard. They come in a canvas flap with pockets sewn in it that you can roll up, and they get very compact and they'll easily fit inside of a small tool bag. And if you have room, carry 2 of each just in case you need to go back to back on a nut and they happen to be the same size. That way you've got your bases covered. And let's not forget about your consumables like zip ties, duct tape, electrical tape, maybe a little bit of mechanics wire for like tying rebar. Can be used to wire things up in a pinch if it's something hot that a zip tie would just melt. And just bring a few little items like this that are compact that you can put in a small space. And if you do your due diligence and you go through and you prioritize by the most common failures and only take what you need to fit your Jeep, it's very possible for you to take your toolkit that you keep in your TJ and reduce it from this to this, saving a whole lot of space and a whole lot of weight. And just remember, Jeep, just explore every possibility.